Be sure to like, comment, and subscribe for more amazing HFY stories. Hit the bell icon to get notified about our latest uploads. The ridicule of the human ***. The towering alien ship descended in a flash of violet light, its sleek, polished hull reflecting the light of a nearby star. It hovered silently above the ground of the human military base, its alien technology so advanced that even the brightest minds on Earth could only marvel at its complexity. This wasn't a diplomatic visit. This was a challenge. The Sisters of the Azoria Empire had arrived, 3 alien women known for their ruthless intelligence and otherworldly beauty. Their mission was clear: to assess Earth's potential for conquest. Colonel James Blackstone stood at the front of the assembled soldiers, his stern expression masking the shock that coursed through him. He had been expecting a typical diplomatic envoy, perhaps a peacekeeping force, but this was something else entirely. The ship's ramp lowered, and from it emerged the 3 sisters, their steps elegant but unmistakably powerful. The eldest sister, Yold, was the first to speak, her voice a blend of authority and amusement. "Is this the greatest of the humans?" she asked, her violet eyes sweeping over the soldiers with disdain. Her golden skin shimmered under the sun, and her hair cascaded like liquid silver. She was impossibly tall, her physique almost otherworldly in its symmetry. Behind her stood her younger sisters, Ilara with her piercing blue eyes and a calculated coldness that radiated from her, and Celine, the youngest but the most curious, with eyes of emerald green and a mischievous smirk that suggested she found this whole situation entertaining. Colonel Blackstone straightened, his military training kicking in. He knew that first impressions were crucial. "I am Colonel Blackstone of the United Earth Command," he said firmly. "What brings the Azoria sisters to Earth?" Yold raised an eyebrow. "You are Earth's strongest soldier, then?" She spoke slowly as if to emphasize her doubt. "A human in command of this pitiful base? How quaint." The soldiers around Blackstone shifted uncomfortably, their eyes flickering between the alien visitors and their commander. The mockery was subtle, but it was clear. These women saw humanity as little more than an amusing curiosity. Ilara stepped forward, her gaze fixed on Blackstone. "You think you can resist us? You are nothing compared to the warriors of the Azoria Empire. Your pathetic weapons, your primitive technology, it is laughable." Celine, ever the playful one, tilted her head and flashed a grin. "I wonder if we could find anything interesting on this planet? Perhaps you'll amuse us before we leave you all to your fate." Blackstone clenched his fists, frustration rising within him, but he kept his composure. This was a test. He had been briefed on the sisters' arrogance, their belief in their superiority. What he hadn't expected was their utter contempt for humanity. It was as if they didn't even see them as a threat, let alone worthy of respect. Yold gave a soft laugh, her voice laced with a cruel edge. "We will take what we want, human. Your world will bend to our will, just like every other species we've encountered." The colonel's lips curled into a tight smile. "Perhaps you're right, but don't be too hasty. Earth has a way of surprising its enemies." "Surprise us then," Ilara said with a dismissive wave. "Show us something worth noticing." Before Blackstone could respond, the ground beneath their feet trembled, and a rumble shook the air. The alien sisters turned, their expressions briefly flickering with interest. It was then that a new, unexpected voice interrupted the moment. "The king has decreed that you 3 will marry this human." A hush fell over the group as the figure of a tall, regal alien appeared on the ramp of the ship. His robes flowed like liquid night, and his presence exuded power. The king of the Azoria Empire, known for his merciless intellect and unmatched authority, stood before them. Yold's face turned cold as she glanced at the king. "You cannot be serious, father?" The king's piercing red eyes locked onto his daughters, his voice unyielding. "I am quite serious, Yold. Your arrogance has blinded you. You will learn humility from this human. He will be your equal, in ways none of you can comprehend." Ilara's expression darkened, and Celine, though surprised, was already beginning to giggle. "So, we are to marry this human?" Celine's voice dripped with mockery, though it was clear she was intrigued by the king's sudden decision. Blackstone stood frozen, momentarily stunned by the king's words. A marriage? To these women? It didn't make sense. What did the king mean by this? Was this some form of punishment or humiliation? Yold stepped forward, her voice seething with anger. "You disgrace us, father. He is a mere human." The king's gaze hardened. "You will learn that humans are more than they appear, Yold. He will show you the strength you failed to see." The 3 sisters exchanged glances, their expressions a mixture of disbelief and defiance. For the first time they seemed unsure of themselves. Yold, the most composed of the three, bit back her retort. The king's word was final. As the king's ship lifted off into the sky, leaving the base in an uneasy silence, Blackstone felt a strange mixture of confusion, curiosity, and dread. What had just happened? And what kind of power did this human, this mere earthling, possess to make the king of the Azoria Empire choose him as the one to teach his daughters a lesson? As the sisters prepared to face this new humiliating reality, Blackstone couldn't help but wonder what lay ahead. The future was uncertain, but one thing was clear. The three alien sisters had underestimated humanity, and perhaps it was time to show them just what earthlings were capable of. The stage was set. The game had begun. The arrival of the unlikely groom ***. The days following the king's decree were filled with tension and confusion. Colonel Blackstone had expected many things from the Azoria Empire's first contact, but this was beyond his wildest imagination. Three of the most powerful and haughty alien sisters in the galaxy, mocked and belittling him one moment, and then suddenly bound by a royal command to marry him? The situation felt absurd, like something out of a bad science fiction novel. The base was in disarray as whispers spread among the soldiers. The media picked up the story and soon it became a global sensation. Earth was on the brink of an intergalactic marriage, and the entire world seemed to be watching with bated breath. Many laughed at the absurdity of the decree, while others saw it as a challenge, a test of humanity's resilience and power. Blackstone, however, had more pressing concerns. He sat in his quarters, reviewing the reports from Earth's diplomatic team. The king's intentions were still unclear, and the fact that the sisters were now ordered to marry him sent an unsettling message. Was this truly a punishment for their arrogance, or was it something more sinister? What did the king hope to achieve with this unprecedented act? There were too many unknowns, and Colonel Blackstone was not one to leave things to chance. A knock at the door interrupted his thoughts. It was Lieutenant Marissa, his second-in-command, a woman who had served with him for over a decade. Her face was grim, the usual spark of humor gone. "Colonel, the sisters have arrived," she said, her voice low. Blackstone stood up, gathering himself. "I'll meet them in the courtyard. Make sure the troops are ready for anything." Marissa nodded and left. As Blackstone made his way to the courtyard, the chill of the evening air seemed to match his mood. He wasn't sure what to expect from the alien sisters. The king's command weighed heavily on him, and he had no doubt the three women would come with all the arrogance and fire of their heritage. But how would they react to the marriage? Would they challenge him directly? Or would they try to manipulate the situation for their own gain? As he stepped into the open area, he saw them. The three sisters stood before him, their alien beauty undeniable. Yold, the eldest, wore a face of stone, her regal demeanor unwavering. Ilara, the coldest of the three, stared at him with narrowed eyes, clearly not impressed. And then there was Celine, the youngest, who stood with a mixture of curiosity and amusement. "Colonel Blackstone," Yold said, her voice sharp and commanding. "You are the one we are to marry? This is preposterous. We are royalty. You are a human." Blackstone took a moment to collect his thoughts, standing tall in front of the three powerful women. "I didn't ask for this," he said, his voice steady. "But it seems the king has other ideas. I don't know what he's planning, but I intend to learn." Ilara scoffed, her lips curling into a sneer. "You think you'll teach us something? Do you not realize how far beneath us you are? You're nothing but a tool in this game, human. A pawn." Celine, on the other hand, seemed more interested in Blackstone as a person. Her eyes flickered with an almost playful glint. "I wonder if this will be as amusing as it sounds," she said, her voice light. "You seem so serious. I suppose it would be boring if we didn't at least try to entertain ourselves?" Yold's expression hardened. "Enough, Celine. We are not here for games." She turned back to Blackstone. "We'll abide by the king's decree, but don't mistake our compliance for weakness. We will not be tamed by you." Blackstone met her gaze without flinching. "I don't want to tame anyone. I'm not the one who issued the decree." A tense silence stretched between them. The courtyard felt unusually quiet, as if the entire world was holding its breath. Finally, Yold broke the silence. "What do you expect from us, human? We have no need for your primitive Earth customs, no desire for anything you have to offer. This marriage, what is it exactly?" Blackstone's eyes narrowed as he considered his words carefully. "I don't know. But I have a feeling this isn't just about your humiliation. The king is a calculating individual. There's a reason he's doing this, and we need to figure it out before it's too late." "Late for what?" Ilara asked, her tone dripping with condescension. "We are the Azoria. No one can harm us." Blackstone took a step closer, his voice becoming more measured. You've underestimated humanity, and that's a mistake. We may not have the technology or the advanced capabilities of your empire, but we have something you don't: ingenuity. And that's something you can't calculate? Yold's gaze softened ever so slightly, but it was clear that she wasn't convinced. You talk a lot for someone who is still beneath us. Perhaps, Blackstone said with a shrug, but I've also seen what humanity is capable of when pushed too far. A murmur of surprise rippled through the three sisters, and for a moment, Blackstone could see a flicker of something in their eyes: curiosity, perhaps even respect. Yold, however, was quick to regain her composure. Do not mistake our interest for admiration, she warned. We are still the rulers here. We'll follow the king's orders, but only because we have no choice. Well, Blackstone said with a faint smile, let's make this interesting then. We'll see who comes out on top. With that, he turned and walked away, his thoughts racing. The sisters were proud, yes, but there was a certain vulnerability to them. Perhaps this whole thing wasn't about domination or conquest after all. Perhaps it was a test, a way for the king to see how his daughters would react to the unknown, to a force they couldn't predict. And in that test, Blackstone would prove that humanity wasn't so easily dismissed. As the sisters watched him go, Celine spoke up, her voice a quiet whisper. He's interesting. I think we may have underestimated him, Yold replied, her voice laced with uncertainty. And as Blackstone left the courtyard, the weight of the king's decree settled on him. He knew this would not be an easy journey, but one thing was certain. He would make them see. Humanity was far more than they had ever imagined. And he would be the one to show them. The unlikely bond ***. The days passed in a blur of tension and stilted interactions. Colonel Blackstone found himself on edge, constantly navigating the precarious relationship between him and the Azoria sisters. The initial mockery had turned into something more complex, a mixture of resistance, intrigue, and, surprisingly, grudging respect. The sisters, though still clearly disdainful of him, seemed to be testing him. They were no longer mocking him outright, but neither had they fully accepted the king's decree. There was something different now. Something had shifted. Blackstone spent his time organizing his soldiers, coordinating with the Earth Defense Council, and quietly plotting his next move. The king's reasons for forcing this marriage were still unclear, but Blackstone could feel the weight of the situation pressing on him. He was caught between two worlds, the human one he fought for and the alien empire that now loomed over Earth. One evening, as Blackstone was reviewing reports in his office, a soft knock at the door interrupted his thoughts. It was Lieutenant Marissa again, though this time her face held an expression of curiosity. Colonel, they're requesting to meet with you, she said. Who? The Azoria sisters. They want to talk. Blackstone raised an eyebrow. Talk? After all this time? Marissa shrugged. You know them better than I do, Colonel. He exhaled slowly. All right. I'll meet them. Prepare the courtyard. In the courtyard, the air was thick with the hum of distant machinery. Blackstone arrived to find the three sisters waiting for him. Yold, the eldest, stood with her arms crossed, her expression unreadable. Ilara, as cold as ever, watched him with an intensity that made Blackstone uneasy. And Celine. Celine was the most unpredictable of them all. Her eyes sparkled with mischief, as though she found the whole situation more amusing than anything else. Yold spoke first, her voice calm but laced with a hidden edge. Colonel, we've reconsidered our position. Blackstone kept his expression neutral. Reconsidered? Ilara's voice was cutting, though not as dismissive as before. We've been observing you. And your people. The king's decree may have been rash, but it was not entirely misguided. Blackstone narrowed his eyes. So what is this? A change of heart? Celine laughed, a light, musical sound that almost seemed out of place given the situation. Oh, it's not quite that simple. We've seen humans fight, seen the strength you all hide behind your primitive technology. You're not as weak as we once thought. Yold shifted slightly, her gaze softening for just a fraction of a moment. But we still do not understand why the king has chosen you, Colonel. You are only human. Maybe that's the point, Blackstone said, his voice steady. The king isn't interested in power or might. He wants to see something different. He wants to see if we can be something more than what you've already seen. And maybe he's hoping that through this marriage we'll all learn something. Ilara scoffed. Learn? There is nothing you could possibly teach us. Not yet, Blackstone said, a hint of defiance creeping into his tone. But you're beginning to understand that humans are unpredictable. We don't follow the same rules as other species. That's what makes us dangerous. Celine's eyes twinkled with curiosity. Dangerous? You don't seem dangerous to me. Yold raised a hand to silence Celine, her expression hardening again. Enough. We didn't come here to exchange pleasantries. What is it you want from us, Colonel? Blackstone took a step forward, meeting Yold's gaze without flinching. I don't want anything from you. But I do think we can teach each other something. Humanity doesn't just survive through brute force. We survive through ingenuity, through adaptability. And if you're willing to open your eyes, you'll see that. Yold stared at him for a long moment as if weighing his words. Finally she spoke. Fine. We'll play your game. For now. But don't mistake this for anything more than that. We still believe we are far superior. The following days were marked by an uneasy truce. Blackstone spent more time with the sisters, attempting to bridge the vast cultural and intellectual divide between them. Though they were dismissive, especially Yold, there was a noticeable change in their behavior. They no longer mocked him openly, though their pride remained palpable. Instead, they began to test him in different ways. One evening, after a long day of exercises and strategy meetings, Blackstone was summoned to the central courtyard once again. This time, the sisters had set up a series of simulations, designed to test his strategic mind. The challenge was clear: beat them at their own game. Yold, the master tactician, stood at the center of the simulation table. We'll give you one chance, Colonel, she said, her tone still condescending but with an edge of respect. Outwit us. Show us why the king thinks you're worth our time. Blackstone surveyed the table. The holographic battlefield was intricate, with a vast array of alien technologies at their disposal, far beyond anything Earth had ever seen. His hand hovered over the controls, the weight of the challenge sinking in. I don't need advanced technology to win, he said, more to himself than to them. I just need to understand how you think. Yold raised an eyebrow, a slight challenge in her eyes. Then prove it. With a steady breath, Blackstone began the simulation. His strategy was unconventional, employing tactics the sisters hadn't anticipated, misdirecting their forces, exploiting their arrogance and capitalizing on their overconfidence. As the minutes passed, the battlefield began to shift in his favor. Slowly but surely the sisters found themselves on the defensive. Ilara's face twisted in frustration as her forces faltered. This is impossible. It's not impossible, Blackstone said, a calm smile tugging at his lips. It's just unexpected. The simulation ended with Blackstone's forces emerging victorious. There was a long silence before Yold spoke. I underestimated you, she admitted, her voice barely a whisper. You truly are different. Blackstone stood tall, but his expression softened. You've only just begun to see what humans can do. Celine broke the silence with a light-hearted laugh. Well, this is getting interesting. You've earned some respect, Colonel. Blackstone nodded. Thank you. But remember, this is only the beginning. There's a lot more to come. The sisters, once so sure of their superiority, now seemed less certain. Their respect for him was growing, but so was their uncertainty. They had underestimated humanity, and for the first time, they were beginning to realize that perhaps the king had chosen wisely. Blackstone had proven himself not just in intellect, but in his unwavering belief that humanity could stand tall, even against the might of an empire like Azoria. But the game was far from over. The test of strength ***. The days that followed were filled with quiet tension. Colonel Blackstone knew that winning the simulation had given him some leverage, but it hadn't won him any true allies among the Azoria sisters. While the sisters seemed to respect his ingenuity, they were still intent on proving their superiority. Their pride remained unbroken, and Blackstone could feel the pressure building with each passing hour. The king's decree still hung over their heads, a constant reminder that the 3 alien women were, in theory, his wives, but no one knew exactly what that meant. Was it a political move? A punishment? Or a test of sorts, one where Blackstone's value would eventually become clear? What was certain was that this strange arrangement had already started to change the way the humans and the Azoria sisters interacted. The rivalry, once tainted with mockery, was beginning to shift into something more unpredictable. The sisters had come to view Blackstone as a worthy adversary, someone who was not just an obstacle to their empire's conquest, but a symbol of something greater, human resilience. But that didn't mean they would make it easy on him. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, casting the sky in shades of orange and purple, Blackstone received a summons. It wasn't from Yold, Ilara or even Celine. It was from the king himself. The message was simple: meet me in the arena. When Blackstone arrived, the vast, open arena was already set up. The ground was a mixture of sand and stone, the air alive with the hum of technology. The sisters were already there, standing in a line near the center of the arena, their expressions unreadable. At the far end of the arena, the king stood on a raised platform, his regal presence impossible to ignore. His dark robes swirled in the wind, and his red eyes glowed with an unsettling intensity. "You've earned my attention, Colonel," the king's voice echoed across the arena, low and powerful. "But there is one final trial you must face before you are truly worthy of this arrangement." Blackstone frowned. "And what's that?" "Strength," the king replied. "I have tested your intellect. Now I will test your body." Yold stepped forward, her golden skin gleaming under the arena lights. "You've beaten us in games of strategy, Colonel, but we are warriors. We will see if your human strength can stand up to Azoria might." Blackstone's heart pounded in his chest. This wasn't what he had expected. A test of strength? He had no illusions about his physical abilities. He was no superhuman, and the Azoria sisters were far stronger than any human he had ever encountered. But he wasn't about to back down. "I'm ready," he said, his voice steady, betraying none of his inner uncertainty. The arena had been outfitted with advanced combat simulators, devices that could create realistic physical training environments. These devices were designed to ensure that the fight was as close to real combat as possible. Blackstone had faced simulations before, but this was different. These weren't just virtual opponents. These were three of the deadliest women in the galaxy, and they were ready to test him to his limits. The sisters didn't waste any time. The moment the signal was given, Yold lunged, her movements fast and graceful, a blur of speed. She was a blur of golden energy, her limbs moving with precision, her every strike perfectly measured. Her attacks were relentless and Blackstone could barely keep up. He dodged and weaved, using every ounce of his military training to avoid her strikes, but he could feel the sting of the blows that landed. She was strong, faster than he could ever have imagined. But he refused to give up. He had fought in countless battles, facing enemies that far outmatched him in every way. This was no different. Yold's eyes flashed with irritation as he managed to avoid yet another strike. "You have some skill, human," she said, circling him. "But you cannot win." "Maybe not," Blackstone grunted, wiping the sweat from his brow, "but I can keep you on your toes." Yold's lips curled into a smile, impressed despite herself. But it was clear that she wasn't going to take it easy on him. She was a warrior, and she wanted to crush this human's defiance once and for all. Before she could strike again, Ilara and Celine moved in, flanking him from either side. Ilara's movements were calculated, slow and deliberate, but her strikes packed devastating force. She was the strategist of the three, preferring to wear her opponents down before going for the kill. Celine, on the other hand, was the wild card. Her movements were erratic, unpredictable, and far more chaotic than anything Blackstone had faced. She seemed to enjoy the chaos of the fight, dancing around him with ease and laughter in her voice. Her attacks were sudden and violent, leaving Blackstone scrambling to defend himself. "You fought well," Ilara said, her voice dripping with condescension, "but we are not like your soldiers, Colonel. You cannot hope to defeat us with brute force." Blackstone gritted his teeth, refusing to give in. "I'm not trying to defeat you. I'm trying to survive." That's when he noticed it, an opening. The sisters were so focused on overwhelming him with speed and strength that they had left themselves vulnerable. Their arrogance had created a chink in their armor. Without thinking, Blackstone shifted his weight and launched himself at Celine, using the momentum to drive her to the ground. The move was unexpected, and for a moment, it caught her off guard. She grunted in surprise, momentarily disoriented. "That's more like it," Celine laughed, brushing herself off. "You're not so bad after all, Colonel." But Blackstone didn't pause. He turned to face Yold, who had been watching the exchange with cold eyes. She wasn't surprised, she had seen what he was capable of. But she wasn't finished yet. "I admit you've impressed me, human," Yold said, her voice low. "But you cannot keep this up forever." "I don't have to," Blackstone said, his voice steady. "I just need to show you that humans don't give up. Not ever." It was then that the king's voice boomed across the arena once again. "Enough." The sisters froze, all three of them turning toward the raised platform where the king stood, his eyes glowing red with authority. "You have tested him," the king said, his voice deep and unyielding. "And though he has proven himself worthy of our respect, the true test is not physical strength alone. Colonel Blackstone has something far more important than that, the will to fight no matter the odds." Yold stepped back, clearly frustrated but somewhat impressed. Ilara's gaze flickered with something akin to respect, and even Celine seemed to take Blackstone more seriously than before. Now you understand, the king continued. This human is not just a warrior. He is a symbol of humanity itself. A species that will not bow and not break. And perhaps, not be so easily conquered after all. Blackstone stood tall, his chest heaving with exertion. He had passed the test. But this was only the beginning. The true battle for Earth's future was still ahead. Unraveling the truth ***. The air in the arena was thick with anticipation, as the lingering hum of the simulation's energy subsided. The Azoria sisters stood motionless, their expressions unreadable, while Colonel Blackstone caught his breath, his body aching from the intensity of the trial. His victory, hard-earned and unexpected, had proven something to the king, to the sisters, and perhaps most importantly to himself. But even as the adrenaline of the fight ebbed away, a nagging thought tugged at the back of his mind. The king's words echoed in his thoughts. The true test is not physical strength alone. Colonel Blackstone has something far more important than that. The will to fight, no matter the odds. It was clear that the king wasn't just testing Blackstone's might. No, this was something deeper. Something far more complex. But what was it? What did the king truly want from him, from humanity? That night, after the arena's dust had settled and the stars began to twinkle in the deep, dark sky above, Blackstone found himself summoned again. This time to a quiet, secluded meeting room within the royal compound. The atmosphere was hushed, the only sound the distant whisper of wind rustling through the corridors. As he entered the room, he was met with the sight of the three sisters waiting for him, seated at a long table. The cold elegance of the room stood in stark contrast to the earlier intensity of the arena, but Blackstone could feel that something was shifting. Yold, the eldest and the one who had been most dismissive of him, was the first to speak. "You surprised us today, Colonel," she said, her tone no longer mocking but more measured. There was a flicker of something, respect, maybe, beneath her cold exterior. "I thought your kind was weaker than we'd been led to believe." Blackstone crossed his arms and stood at the head of the table, his stance relaxed but alert. "And now?" "Now I'm intrigued," she said. "You're not like the other species we've encountered. There's something different about humans. Something we didn't expect." Ilara, ever the cold strategist, narrowed her eyes as though searching for an angle she hadn't seen before. "And yet, we still don't understand why you're here. Why the king would choose a human for this arrangement. You've proven yourself in combat, but what is it you're really after? Why risk everything for this?" Blackstone didn't hesitate. "I'm not after anything. The king's decree wasn't my choice, but I'll make the best of it. You all think this is a game, but to me it's about survival. If there's something more to the king's decision, then I'll figure it out. But this," he gestured between himself and the sisters, "this is about more than just a marriage. It's about the future of my people." Celine, the youngest of the sisters, leaned forward, her eyes sparkling with a curiosity that was almost childlike. "So you're not here to conquer us then?" she teased, her voice light. "That's disappointing. I was hoping for more of a challenge." Blackstone couldn't help but smile faintly. "If I wanted to conquer anyone, I wouldn't have bothered with any of this." There was a moment of silence before Yold broke it with a sharp gesture. "Enough of the games, Colonel. We didn't bring you here to talk about your strategy. We need to understand why the king ordered this marriage. And we need your help to figure it out." That caught Blackstone off guard. "Help? Why would you need my help?" Ilara's voice was flat but serious. "The king's motivations are unclear. We've spent years in service to him, and yet, this decree makes no sense. If we were to marry you, what does that accomplish? What is the king really after?" Blackstone sat down at the table, suddenly aware that this was no longer about alien politics or strange rituals. The sisters, especially Yold and Ilara, were not just worried about their pride, they were worried about the future of the Azoria Empire. The king, despite his power and wisdom, had made a decision that none of them fully understood, and that lack of understanding was starting to shake their foundations. "I don't know," Blackstone admitted, his voice low. "I don't know what the king is thinking, but I can guess that it's not what it seems on the surface. There's a reason he's involved us, humanity I mean, and I suspect it's something big." Yold leaned forward, her expression unreadable. "What are you suggesting?" Blackstone hesitated, his fingers tapping rhythmically on the table. "I'm suggesting that the king is playing a game. A long game. He's testing us, testing you. And I think the marriage is part of that. He wants to see if we can cooperate, if we can learn from each other, if we can find a way to survive and thrive together." "And if we fail?" Ilara asked, her eyes hard as stone. "What happens then?" "Then," Blackstone said quietly, the king might be setting us up for something much darker. But I think he's more interested in seeing what we can do when we're forced to work together. It's not just about strength or intellect. It's about adaptability. About forging alliances in places where they shouldn't exist. Celine's laughter broke the tension. I knew it. This was all part of some grand test, wasn't it? Yold's gaze softened for the first time. You may be right, Colonel. But there's more to it than that. The king, he's not just testing us or you. He's testing the future of this galaxy. His empire is growing, yes, but there are forces beyond his control. Forces we cannot defeat with strength alone. Blackstone's brow furrowed. What kind of forces? Yold exchanged a brief glance with her sisters before speaking again. There are factions within the Azoria Empire, factions that believe the king is becoming too weak, too unpredictable. There are whispers of a coup, of rebellion. The king's decision to arrange this marriage to bring Earth into his fold is not just political. It's a test for us all. If we fail, the empire will fracture. If we succeed, the empire may rise even further. Blackstone's mind spun as the pieces began to fall into place. The king's decree, the marriage, the tests, it was all connected. He wasn't just testing him. He was testing the future of the Azoria Empire, and humanity was at the heart of it. We're in the middle of a power struggle, Blackstone muttered. And we don't even know who the true enemy is? Celine's eyes widened. So you think the king is trying to prevent a war? I think, Blackstone said, he's trying to find a way to unite his people with yours. To show that humanity has something valuable to offer. But if we fail, the consequences could be catastrophic. Yold stared at him, her icy demeanor cracking for a moment. Then we need to prepare. If we are to marry, then we must understand what we're fighting for. Blackstone nodded slowly, a feeling of resolve settling over him. Agreed. We're in this together now. And if we're going to survive this, we need to learn from each other. The marriage is just the beginning. The tension in the room was palpable, but something else had shifted as well. Respect. Trust. A fragile alliance, born out of necessity, was beginning to form between humanity and the Azoria sisters. And though they still had much to learn about each other, one thing was clear. Their survival depended on the strength of that bond. As the sisters rose to leave, Yold paused, her eyes locking with Blackstone's. This is not just a game, Colonel. This is our future. I know, he replied, his voice steady. And we'll face it together. The breaking point ***. The days following the meeting were filled with a quiet sense of urgency. Colonel Blackstone had learned more about the Azoria sisters in those few hours than he had in the months prior. What had started as a contest of strength and pride between two very different species was now shaping up to be a much more complex struggle for survival, power, and alliance. As he spent more time with Yold, Elara, and Celine, he began to understand just how deep the fractures ran within the Azoria Empire. The king's decree, the marriage, was not merely an act of diplomacy, it was a gambit to prevent civil war. The factions within the empire were on the brink of tearing it apart, and Blackstone's role in the unfolding events had become more critical than he'd ever imagined. A week after the arena test, Blackstone was called to a private meeting with the king. He entered the dimly lit chamber, the air thick with the hum of ancient, advanced technology embedded in the walls. The king stood by a large window, staring out over the sprawling city beneath them, an empire that was vast, alien, and, to Blackstone, intimidating. You have done well, Colonel, the king said without turning around. But I wonder if you truly understand what you have begun. Blackstone didn't speak immediately. The king's words carried weight, and Blackstone knew better than to rush in. He had his suspicions, but they needed to be confirmed. I think I have a good idea, Blackstone replied carefully, his voice steady. The marriage, the trials, it's all about unity. You want to unite your people and us. But it's not as simple as that, is it? The king turned slowly, his red eyes glowing faintly in the low light. No, it is not. Unity is just the beginning. There is a greater struggle at play. And it begins with you, Colonel Blackstone. Blackstone raised an eyebrow. Me? Yes, the king said. You and your species. Humanity. You are more than just a potential ally. You are the pivot upon which the future of this empire will turn. You are the key to our survival. Blackstone frowned. You've said that before, but you've never explained why. What do you need from us? From me? The king's expression was inscrutable. I need you to understand what you are about to face. The Azoria Empire is crumbling, not from external threats, but from within. There are those who would see me dethroned, who believe I am weak, too distracted by this alliance. They would kill me if they could. Blackstone was silent, processing the king's words. And what do you expect from me? Help me, the king said simply, his voice full of gravity. Help me stabilize my empire. Help me prevent the rebellion that is already brewing among my people. Your species, your strength, they are the one thing that could tip the balance. Blackstone's mind raced as he tried to make sense of the situation. The king wanted his help, not just as a military commander but as a symbol. Humanity's resilience, what he had shown in the arena, what he had shown through his refusal to give up, was exactly what the king needed. A symbol of hope, of resistance in the face of a crumbling empire. The king wasn't just testing Blackstone's strength or intelligence, he was testing his ability to lead, to inspire others. I don't know if I can do that, Blackstone admitted. This isn't just about fighting. You're asking me to help you manipulate an entire empire. That's not something I'm comfortable with. The king stepped closer, his presence overwhelming. You misunderstand, Colonel. I'm not asking you to manipulate. I'm asking you to support me, to become the catalyst for change. If we can unite the Azoria and the humans, if we can show them that cooperation is the only way forward, then we might stand a chance. But only if you are willing to fight for this cause. Blackstone stared into the king's glowing eyes, feeling the weight of the decision pressing down on him. What happens if I don't? If you do not, the king said softly, then I will be forced to take more drastic measures. The rebellion will succeed, and the Azoria Empire will be torn apart. Your people will be destroyed along with it. But if you accept, you will not only help save my empire. You will help save humanity as well. The tension in the room was palpable, and Blackstone couldn't ignore the sense of urgency in the king's voice. There was something personal at stake here, something more than politics or strategy. This was about survival. Blackstone knew what he had to do. What's the first step? The king's lips curled into a rare, almost imperceptible smile. The first step is simple. You must win the loyalty of my sisters, the Azoria sisters. Yold, Elara and Selene. They are the only ones who can truly help you in this. They are the ones who control the military, the heart of the Empire's power. If you can earn their trust, you will be the key to bringing the Empire together. But it will not be easy. They are proud, strong and fiercely independent. Blackstone nodded, understanding the weight of the task. And if they don't trust me? That night, Blackstone met with the sisters again, the conversation feeling even more tense than before. He could sense the shift in their attitude since the arena trial. Yold was no longer mocking but calculating. Elara had grown more thoughtful, her eyes no longer filled with disdain but with curiosity. And Selene? Well, Selene was Selene. She had a mischievous glint in her eyes, but Blackstone could see the undercurrent of seriousness there as well. He couldn't help but feel the weight of the king's request pressing down on him. He had to gain their trust, but how? I need your help, Blackstone said bluntly, his voice unwavering. The king has asked me to unite us. To unite Azoria and humanity. To stop a rebellion that could tear this empire apart. Yold's gaze sharpened. And why should we help you, human? What makes you think we'll trust you? Elara crossed her arms, her expression wary. The king's plan is dangerous. If we're to follow you, we need to understand why you're here. What makes you believe you can lead us? I don't know if I can lead, Blackstone admitted, but I know that humanity has survived against impossible odds. If you can work with us, if we can work together, there's a chance we can prevent the collapse of this empire. And if we fail, we all lose? Selene leaned back in her chair, her eyes twinkling with a strange mixture of amusement and consideration. So, you're asking us to put our faith in you? A human? Yes, Blackstone said, his voice steady. I am. The room fell into silence as the sisters exchanged looks. Blackstone held his breath, not knowing if they would accept or reject him. Finally Yold spoke. I don't know if I trust you yet, human. But I'm willing to see if you're as resilient as you claim. We'll help you. For now. Elara nodded. You've earned a chance. Don't waste it. Selene's smile widened. Looks like we're stuck with you, Colonel. Blackstone let out a breath he hadn't realized he was holding. It wasn't much, but it was enough. They were willing to help him for now. And that was all he needed to keep the fragile hope of uniting the Azoria Empire and saving humanity alive. But as the door closed behind him, Blackstone knew that this was only the beginning. The road ahead would be full of obstacles, betrayals and challenges. And every step would bring him closer to the breaking point. The Shattered Alliance ***. The meeting with the sisters was scheduled for the next day, but Blackstone couldn't shake the nagging feeling that something was off. The tension was palpable in the air, and he could see the subtle shifts in the behavior of each of the Azoria sisters. Yold had grown quieter, her usual arrogance replaced with something darker, more contemplative. Ilara was becoming more distant, her once steady gaze now filled with mistrust. And Celine, ever the wild card, was restless, as though waiting for the right moment to strike. Each of them was a piece of a puzzle, and Blackstone was still trying to figure out where he fit in. He arrived in the grand hall earlier than expected, hoping to gather his thoughts before the confrontation. The sisters were already there, standing together by the large, intricately carved table, their faces a mixture of curiosity and caution. Yold's eyes met his first, a flicker of something he couldn't quite read crossing her face before she spoke. "We've been thinking, Colonel." Yold's voice was sharp, her tone betraying the usual certainty she held. "About the king's plan." "About your plan?" Blackstone raised an eyebrow. "And?" Ilara spoke this time, her voice colder than usual. "You ask us to trust you. You say you want to unite our peoples to stop the rebellion, but we see no evidence that you can lead. You're human. You're not one of us. What makes you think we should put our faith in you?" Blackstone took a deep breath, feeling the weight of her words press down on him. He knew that earning their trust was only part of the equation. The real test was whether or not they could work together. "I don't expect you to trust me right away. But I'm here because I believe we have something to offer each other. Humanity's survival instinct, our ability to adapt, to fight no matter the odds, is something you cannot ignore. But you're right. This isn't just about trust. It's about what we can build together." Celine chuckled softly, but her laughter had no warmth in it. "Build together? You're asking us to gamble everything on you. What makes you think we're that desperate?" "I'm not asking you to gamble," Blackstone replied firmly. "I'm asking you to consider what happens if we fail. If we don't act now, both your empire and humanity will be caught in the middle of a war we cannot win. The rebellion you fear will break your people apart, and there will be nothing left to salvage. We're not just fighting for survival anymore, we're fighting for the future of both our species." There was silence in the room as the words hung in the air. The sisters exchanged looks, as though weighing the gravity of his words. Blackstone knew the stakes had never been higher, but he could also feel the cracks forming in the alliance. Finally, Yold spoke again, her voice softer but filled with a quiet determination. "You're right. There's too much at stake for us to ignore it. But it's not just about you, Colonel. It's about us. About whether we can trust you to protect our future." "You have my word," Blackstone said, meeting her gaze. "If we are to succeed, I will do everything in my power to ensure our survival." The following days brought a sense of uneasy cooperation. Blackstone began to train alongside the sisters, learning their tactics, studying their culture, and offering his own insights in return. Their strategies were calculated, precise, and rooted in a long history of conquest. But Blackstone's approach was different, more flexible, more adaptable. He saw possibilities they couldn't, and they saw strength in him that they hadn't before. Slowly, a mutual respect began to form. However, the undercurrent of rebellion within the empire was growing stronger. The king's health had started to decline rapidly, his once unyielding strength now faltering in ways that were becoming impossible to ignore. Whispers of his imminent death circulated through the court, and with it, the tensions that had been bubbling beneath the surface began to boil over. The factions opposed to the king's leadership were growing bolder, their ambitions more dangerous. It wasn't long before Blackstone received word from the king's advisors that a coup was imminent. An assassination attempt was being planned against the king, and the conspirators were already inside the palace. The sisters, along with Blackstone, had to act quickly if they were to prevent the empire from descending into chaos. In the dead of night, the sisters gathered in the king's private chambers. The air was thick with urgency, and Blackstone could see the resolve in their eyes. Yold, Ilara, and Celine stood together, no longer divided by their past skepticism, but united in their shared goal. "We know what we have to do," Yold said, her voice calm but filled with an edge of determination. "We protect the king at all costs. If we don't, the rebellion will succeed, and this empire will fall." Ilara nodded, her hands clasped tightly in front of her. "We'll need to move quickly. The conspirators will strike soon, and we can't afford to wait." Blackstone took a deep breath, steeling himself for the coming storm. He had always been a soldier, but this was different. This was not just about fighting, it was about saving everything he had come to care about, even if it meant sacrificing everything he had. "We move as one," Blackstone said, his voice steady and commanding. "We stop the rebellion before it starts. We stop the king from dying, and we hold the empire together." Celine's eyes flashed with something dangerous, almost excited. Finally, some real action. They moved swiftly, the palace's halls silent under the cover of darkness. Blackstone led the charge, with the sisters flanking him, their every step precise and deliberate. It wasn't long before they encountered the first of the conspirators, an elite group of Azoria soldiers, armed and ready to strike. Without hesitation, Blackstone and the sisters engaged them in a silent, brutal fight, each move calculated, each strike executed with deadly precision. The battle was fast and brutal, but Blackstone could feel the intensity of their bond growing stronger with every passing second. This wasn't just a fight for survival, it was a fight for their future, for the survival of the Empire and the humanity he represented. By the time they reached the king's chamber, the conspirators had been neutralized. But there was no time to celebrate. The king's health had taken a turn for the worse, and despite their efforts, they were too late to save him from the poison that had been slowly killing him. The sisters stood over him, their faces filled with sorrow and regret. Yold knelt beside the king, her voice thick with emotion. "Father, you were right. We were blind." Blackstone stood back, watching the scene unfold. He had done all he could, but the Empire was now without a ruler, and the rebellion would only grow stronger. The king's death had fractured the delicate balance they had fought to protect, and now, it was up to the sisters, and to Blackstone, to find a way to hold everything together. "What happens now?" Blackstone asked, his voice steady but his mind racing. Yold stood slowly, her face hardened. "Now we make sure the Empire doesn't fall apart. And we find a new way forward. Together." The future of both the Azoria Empire and humanity was uncertain, but one thing was clear, the fight was far from over. The king's death sent shockwaves through the palace. It was as if the very foundation of the Azoria Empire had been shaken to its core. His reign, though contested by some, had been a symbol of strength, stability, and unity. Now, with his passing, a vacuum of power threatened to send the Empire into chaos. And in the midst of this turmoil, Blackstone and the Azoria sisters stood at the precipice of something far more dangerous than anything they had anticipated. As the sisters mourned their father, Blackstone stood on the fringes, a silent witness to their grief. He had come to respect them, each one in her own way, Yold with her fierce determination and unyielding pride, Ilara with her cautious wisdom and keen intellect, and Celine who had grown from a playful, unpredictable force into someone more grounded, though no less dangerous. They were all different, yet all bound by a shared purpose now, and it was that purpose that would define the fate of the Empire, and of humanity. Yold was the first to break the silence. She stood, her back straight, her expression unreadable as she looked down at her father's body. "We cannot afford to mourn for long," she said, her voice cold, yet filled with resolve. "The Empire needs a ruler. We must decide who will take the throne before it is too late." Ilara, her eyes red from crying, nodded slowly. "You're right. But it's not just about who takes the throne. It's about how we stabilize the Empire and prevent a civil war. If we don't act quickly, the factions will tear each other apart. There are too many who want power." Celine's eyes glinted in the dim light. "And there are those who would seek to exploit this situation. A power vacuum is like blood in the water, everyone smells it." Blackstone stepped forward, his voice firm but respectful. "I may not understand the intricacies of Azoria politics, but I know one thing for sure. If you don't act together, this empire will fall apart. Humanity is already on the verge of collapse from its own conflicts. If you fracture, we both lose everything." Yold turned her piercing gaze toward him, her lips curling into a subtle but dangerous smile. "Your human pragmatism is almost admirable, Colonel. But your understanding of Azoria is still incomplete." "I don't claim to understand everything," Blackstone said. "But I know that humanity knows how to adapt. How to survive even when the odds are against us. You can learn from that just as much as we can learn from you." The sisters exchanged a glance. It was clear that Blackstone had made his case, but the path forward wasn't yet clear. Yold, as the eldest and the one most steeped in Azoria tradition, seemed poised to take control, but Ilara and Celine were more cautious. The decision would be theirs, and perhaps in some strange way humanity's too. "We must make a choice," Yold declared finally. "One of us must claim the throne. If we are to keep this empire from falling apart, we cannot afford to wait." Celine crossed her arms, leaning against the wall with a bemused expression. "And how do we decide who's worthy? Is it based on blood? Power? Or something else?" "Power is not the only thing that matters," Ilara interjected. "If we are to avoid civil war, we need a ruler who can command the loyalty of the military factions. And right now, I see only one person capable of that." Blackstone stiffened, surprised by Ilara's words. "You're suggesting me?" Ilara nodded. "You have earned the respect of the military, Colonel. The trials, your strength, your willingness to fight for the survival of this empire, those things have made you a symbol. It's not just your power that matters now. It's the fact that you have something that we've lost, hope. You're the bridge we need to unite us. Yold's gaze sharpened and she stepped forward. And you think you can just walk in and claim the throne for yourself? You are not Azoria. You are not one of us. I'm not asking for the throne, Blackstone said, his voice steady. I'm not here to take over. But I am asking for the opportunity to help you rebuild. To help you stabilize this empire. If we're going to survive, we need to lead together. And that means you must decide what kind of empire you want. Celine's eyes sparkled, her lips curling into a sly smile. I like this. He's not afraid to speak his mind. Blackstone gave her a tight smile. I've learned that when you're dealing with an empire on the brink of collapse, there's no room for hesitation. Either we unite or we all fall. And that includes humanity. Yold looked from Blackstone to her sisters, her expression unreadable. Perhaps there is wisdom in your words, Colonel. But you are asking us to trust you in ways we've never trusted anyone before. The days that followed were filled with frantic, tense negotiations. Blackstone was called to the Royal Council chambers, where the most powerful factions in the Azoria Empire had gathered. The palace was now a battlefield of words, each faction vying for control. The situation was volatile. Too many leaders, too many egos, too much distrust. The death of the king had left a void, and the political maneuvers began in earnest. The sisters took their places among the council, each trying to wield their influence over the proceedings. Yold argued with strength and conviction, Ilara with careful logic and Celine with charm and wit. But Blackstone, despite his lack of experience in Azoria politics, became the fulcrum around which the debate tilted. His proposals, grounded in practicality, began to win over the more pragmatic elements of the council. Still, the real struggle lay not in the council chambers but in the streets of the empire itself. News of the king's death had spread like wildfire, and the unrest was palpable. Factions once loyal to the king were now splintering, and those who had remained in the shadows, waiting for a moment of weakness, were seizing the opportunity to strike. One evening, as the council convened once more, an urgent message arrived. A large rebellion had broken out in one of the eastern provinces, led by a faction of dissidents who had long been opposed to the king's rule. The rebellion was gaining ground fast, and the empire's military was stretched thin, unable to respond in time. Blackstone's heart sank as he listened to the report. The rebellion was a test, not just for the Azoria Empire but for humanity as well. If they could not put it down quickly, the instability would spread like wildfire. The rebellion would signal the end of any hope for peace, or unity. We need to act now, Blackstone said, standing up. If we don't strike back fast, the rebellion will spread across the entire empire. We'll lose everything. Ilara looked at him, her face hardening. And how do we do that? With what forces? Blackstone's eyes narrowed. We have to act decisively. We'll need every soldier, every weapon, every ally we can muster. If we fight, we need to fight as one. This isn't just about keeping the throne, it's about keeping this empire alive. Yold, who had been silent up until that moment, stood and faced her sisters. This is the moment. We either fight together or we risk losing everything our father built. The battle for the eastern provinces was swift and brutal. Blackstone led the charge alongside the sisters, coordinating the Azoria military with humanity's own forces. The rebellion was quelled in a matter of days, but the victory came at a heavy cost. Dozens of lives were lost, and the scars of battle would linger in the minds of every soldier involved. As Blackstone stood overlooking the battlefield, the weight of what had been accomplished, and what had been lost, settled heavily on his shoulders. The Azoria Empire had been saved for now, but the cost of maintaining peace was clear. The alliances were fragile, the trust between the factions tenuous. The real work was just beginning. As the dust settled, Yold turned to Blackstone, her expression one of respect, though still guarded. You've done what no one else could. You've shown us what it means to fight for survival, to fight for something greater than ourselves. Perhaps there is more to you than just a soldier. Blackstone met her gaze, his voice soft but filled with conviction. We fight for each other. That's the only way forward. The future of the Azoria Empire and the future of humanity was still uncertain. But for the first time there was hope. There was a chance. And that was more than either of them had dared to believe in the days before. The road ahead was still perilous, but together they might just survive the storm. Thanks for watching, everyone. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe for more exciting HFY stories. Your support means the world to us. And make sure to tap the bell icon so you never miss an update. Stay tuned for our next adventure, and until then, keep exploring the stars. See you in the next video.